this episode of Sports Science, we want to find out what could kill you quicker. The baddest man on the planet, Fedor Emelianenko, or a deadly python.
Whoa!
Can one of the PGA's best, Brad Faxon, hack his way out of literally everything? Think you could survive an NFL line of scrimmage? We'll test what happens when an average guy faces off with an all-pro behemoth. And we test the brutal consequences when an outfielder misjudges a fly ball. Baseball becomes a full-speed contact sport. Athletes go for broke. And science picks up the pieces. In this former airplane hangar, we created the world's best sports laboratory. A rockin' high-tech facility with one purpose: to analyze the best athletes in the world. And with our new cutting-edge mobile laboratory, the world is now our testing ground. We've raised the bar to push the limits of human performance. We're bigger and better than ever before. This is Sports Science. When we watch football on television, it's difficult to get perspective on just how big and strong the players are, because they're all big and strong. So our question is, what would happen to a regular guy if he goes up against an NFL player? Could an average guy survive the line of scrimmage? To gain some perspective, we hit the road and travel to the Sports Science Outdoor Testing Facility. And to help us conduct this test, we recruited a man who personifies the raw power and brute force of the NFL. All-pro defensive tackle, Chris Jenkins. Chris is one of the hardest hitters in the NFL. With textbook technique for exploding through an offensive lineman.
When I want to get under a man's pads, it has to do with my explosion. I'll start with my feet, and I'll roll up through my hips, and I'll put everything into my hands. And then when I explode, everything rolls up.
To execute this experiment, we need an average guy. So we scraped the middle of the barrel and came up with this guy, Sports Science host John Brinkus. Standing 5'8" and weighing 160 pounds, John is aggressively average.
Chris Jenkins, we've measured a lot of collisions in football. Now, one thing that we really don't get at home is the perspective. I mean, how big are you?
6'5", 360.
Okay, I'm 5'8", 160. So when was the last time you were my size?
7th grade, I think.
Okay, 7th grade.
Honestly, in my body, it just really feels like I'm trying to hurt somebody. I'm trying to intimidate the person every time I hit them, and usually it's somebody that's comparable to my size, if not the same size, and I want to make sure that they feel that hit and they feel that pain. My knees still hurt to this day from the collisions over the course of 7 years. It's very brutal.
It's brutal.
It's brutal.
So what we want to do is a one-of-a-kind experiment. We're going to have you, the NFL superstar, going up against me, the average Joe. We're going to go mano-a-mano, head-to-head, and measure that collision.
To measure the impact an average Joe would experience on an NFL lineup scrimmage, we're wiring up both test subjects with cutting-edge hardware.
Both Chris and I are going to be wearing an Inform accelerometer around our waists, and this is going to measure the transfer of energy from him to me, which can't be good for me. So I'm going up against Chris Jenkins. How are we going to measure the force of the collision?
Well, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to use this transient shock recorder. It's a triaxial accelerometer that we're going to put in your shoulder pads. That's going to actually let us see the shock in which you first get hit and then when you land on your back. And then the other thing we're going to be doing is we're going to look at your head accelerations for when he first hits you and once again when you fall on your head. And for that, we're going to be using the Simbex wireless telemetry system, where we have 6 accelerometers that'll wirelessly send your head accelerations to this computer.
We have 2 Inform accelerometer devices. Now, these devices measure acceleration in all 3 planes of movement. We're going to put one on Chris, one on John. We're going to see how Chris's impact transfers that energy across to John as they make their collision.
If he's going to stand over there, I'm going to toss him. And I'm going to do it as hard as I can and for as far as I can, and I'm going to get as mad as I can. It's going to be the real thing.
I can't even figure out how to get my arm through this. This is not good.
While our host struggles with the incredibly difficult task of putting on a jersey, Chris does some simple warm-up exercises.
That guy is a beast. He's pushing the 2-man sled all by himself, just like it's nothing.
The average NFL defensive lineman weighs almost 300 pounds, and he battles offensive linemen who average about 320. So our 160-pound lab rat is clearly in way over his head.
You look like a kicker.
I hope all the average Joes out there appreciate this, because I'm about to get my bell rung.
Let's do this.
Time to find out how an average guy would try to stop an elite NFL defensive lineman.
You all right?
Ooh. Ow, that hurt. Oh, that didn't feel good at all.
So to answer the question, what happens to a regular guy when he goes up against an NFL player? Well, he goes up. Data from the Inform accelerometer reveals that at the peak of his flight, John's head was almost 9 feet off the ground.
All of that power drives straight into John, producing this tremendous collision, transferring all of his energy across, literally throwing John out of the way.
So how much force did Chris use to launch John into orbit? Our cutting-edge motion capture technology reveals the answer. John's mistake is rising up too quickly, which raises his center of gravity, decreasing his stability. A smart lineman like Chris stays low and aligns the angles of his body for maximum impact. He does this by creating 2 90-degree angles with his body's big levers, the arms and the legs. His shins are in line with his forearms, and they draw a straight line through the center of his target. By creating this straight line, his optimal foundation of leverage, Chris is able to launch John with 600 pounds of force. And worse, John returns to Earth with a painful 1,600 pounds of force. And if we extrapolate this data